Under the copper sky of the Montana plains, the sound of a hammer echoed against the timber walls of a half-finished fence. Thatcher Cole worked alone, sleeves rolled to his elbows, dust clinging to his skin. He was foreman now, though it felt more like caretaker of ghosts. His brother and sister-in-law had died in a stagecoach wreck 6 months ago, leaving behind 2 children who hadn't spoken much since. The ranch had always been a rough place. Men came and went, and most carried more whiskey than warmth. The bunkhouse once rattled with laughter, poker chips, and guitar tunes. Now it sat quiet, like the grave ridge where the children's parents rested. Even the horses moved more slowly these days, as if grief had spread through every post and nail. Inside the main house, little Ben sat at the window ledge with a wooden horse in hand. His sister Emma hummed a tune too soft to make out. Thatcher heard it from the porch, thin and shaky like the sound of something that might break if touched. He set his hat back and sighed. They needed someone with patience, gentleness, maybe even a bit of music. But no one in the valley wanted to live among grieving ranch hands. The last woman he'd hired left after 2 weeks, saying she couldn't sleep with all that silence pressing on her chest. That's when the telegram came: widow seeking work. Experience with children. Discreet. No name, just a promise to arrive on the morning stage from Billings. Thatcher didn't expect much. Folks came and went like tumbleweeds around here, but when the stagecoach stopped in front of the post office the next day, the woman who stepped down wasn't what he expected. She wore plain brown, her bonnet hiding most of her face, and carried a single carpet bag. She moved like someone used to keeping her head low. The driver tipped his hat, saying she'd hummed a lullaby the whole way, sweet as rain on dust. Thatcher introduced himself, but she only gave a small nod. "Nora Wynne," she said. Her voice carried a soft calm that made even the restless horses still. On the ride back to the ranch, Nora asked a few questions. She looked at the open land, the burnt orange hills, the faded barn that leaned like an old soldier. "It's quiet here," she said at last. "Too quiet," Thatcher replied. That night the bunkhouse filled with uneasy curiosity. The men, rough and dusty from the day's work, eyed her like she was a ghost come walking. But when Nora set the children by the hearth and began to hum, just a hum, no words, the room changed. The same cowhands who had once cursed the long nights grew still, listening. Ben fell asleep against her arm before the song even finished. Emma leaned close and whispered, "She sounds like Mama." Thatcher, standing near the door, swallowed hard. For the first time in months, the bunkhouse didn't feel like a tomb. When the others drifted off, Nora stayed by the fire, sewing a tear in Ben's shirt. Her hands trembled once, just once, before steadying again. Thatcher noticed but said nothing. Later, as the moonlight cut across the floorboards, he caught her standing by the window, staring into the darkness beyond the corral. Her lips moved silently. Prayer or memory, he couldn't tell. He wanted to ask where she came from, but something in her stillness warned him not to. There was a kind of waiting in her eyes, like someone listening for hoofbeats she hoped would never come. And though he didn't know it yet, the quiet she carried wasn't peace at all. It was hiding. The morning sun rose pale over the prairie, spilling gold through the bunkhouse windows. Nora was already awake, her hands in a wash basin, sleeves rolled high. She worked quietly, humming under her breath as the water rippled. The children sat nearby, Emma brushing her doll's tangled hair, Ben watching her every move like she was a story come to life. Thatcher stepped in, boots heavy on the wooden floor. "You're up early," he said. Nora didn't turn. "Old habits," she replied. "Morning's the best time to make a place feel alive." He watched her hang the damp cloths to dry. "You're not afraid of hard work," he said. "I'm afraid of idleness," she said softly. "It leaves too much room for remembering." Her words caught him off guard. He nodded once and left her to it. Outside, the ranch hands were already moving, feeding horses, checking fences, pretending not to notice the new woman inside. But every man there had heard her lullaby the night before. They were still thinking about it. Some even smiled when they passed the window. By breakfast, the table felt different. The coffee was hot, the biscuits weren't burned, and the children laughed for the first time in months. One of the cowhands, O'Brien, winked at Nora and said, "Didn't know we hired a miracle worker." Nora smiled faintly but didn't answer. Thatcher saw the change too. The air in the ranch wasn't so heavy, but peace never lasted long out here. That afternoon, Sheriff Wilkes rode up, his horse stirring dust. He was a broad man with a gray beard and a voice that filled a room before he did. "Mornin', Thatcher," he said, swinging down. "Heard you took on new help." Thatcher nodded. "Nanny for the kids." The sheriff's eyes moved toward the bunkhouse door where Nora stood in the shadow. "That's her?" Thatcher stiffened. "What about it?" Wilkes rubbed his chin. "Had a traveler come through 2 days ago. Said there's a woman been missing from over in the Dakota Territory. Name sounded different, but the description, brown hair, quiet, always singing to herself, nearly fits." Nora froze in the doorway. The color drained from her face. Thatcher glanced between them. "You think she's in trouble?" "Don't rightly know yet," said Wilkes. "But the fella she was married to, gambling sort. Mean reputation. Claims she ran off with something that wasn't hers." The sheriff tipped his hat and rode away, leaving a silence heavy enough to choke on. Inside, Nora set her hands on the table to steady herself. "He's mistaken," she said quietly. "I've never been to Dakota." Thatcher studied her. Her eyes were steady, but her voice carried that quiver again, the same one he'd heard when she first arrived. "You can stay," he said finally. "But if there's trouble coming, I need to know what kind." Nora didn't answer. She picked up Ben and carried him to the porch, her face hidden in the child's hair. That night, the wind rose, whistling through the cottonwoods. The bunkhouse men played cards to keep from thinking, but the talk had shifted. "Sheriff's got questions," one said. "Don't matter," another replied. "She's good with the young'uns. That's more than we've had in a long time." Thatcher stood apart, staring at the flames in the stove. He couldn't shake the sheriff's words or the look on Nora's face. There was something she wasn't telling him. Outside, the horses stirred. Far off, thunder rolled across the plains, and somewhere in that darkness a rider was moving east, carrying a bounty poster with a woman's face that looked an awful lot like Nora Wynne. The next few days passed under a sky the color of tin. The air smelled of rain, though none came. The ranch kept busy. Calves needed branding. Fences needed mending, but everyone felt the tension humming low, like a wire pulled too tight. Nora stayed close to the children, teaching Emma to sew and Ben to spell his name in the dust. Her laughter, soft, surprised, sometimes floated through the bunkhouse and made even the roughest men pause mid-task. But at night, when the lamps burned low, she sat alone by the window, staring toward the far road that led out of town. Thatcher noticed. He wasn't a man who asked questions easily. But the more he watched Nora, the more he saw the small tells, the way her shoulders stiffened when horses approached, how her eyes darted to the door every time a rider passed. She lived like someone listening for footsteps that didn't belong. One evening, O'Brien came in from town, dust thick on his hat. He tossed a folded paper onto the table. "Sheriff's been hanging these," he said. Thatcher opened it. His gut went cold. A bounty poster. The face wasn't exact, but the eyes, the calm, steady eyes, were the same. Wanted for questioning Mrs. Eleanor Winfield. Accused of aiding fugitive gambler Thomas Winfield in theft and fraud. Reward offered, O'Brien whistled low. "Looks a whole lot like our Miss Wynne, don't it?" Thatcher folded the poster. "Not our business," he said, though his voice didn't sound like his own. That night, after the others turned in, he walked to the bunkhouse door and knocked once. Nora opened it halfway, lamplight spilling over her tired face. "Was your name ever Winfield?" he asked quietly. Her fingers tightened on the door. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she stepped aside. "Come in," she whispered. Inside, the children slept near the fire, wrapped in quilts. Nora's hands trembled as she poured tea, though she didn't drink. "I was married to him," she said. "Thomas Winfield." A gambler. Charming when he wanted to be. Dangerous when he didn't get his way. Thatcher stayed silent, letting her speak. He lost everything, she went on. Money, home, me. He started blaming me for it all. Said I was bad luck. When the law came after him for cheating men at cards, he said I'd helped. I ran before they could decide which of us to hang first. Her eyes lifted, wet but steady. I came here because I thought the world might forget me. Thatcher nodded slowly. And the children? They're my sisters, she said. At least that's what I told folks, he frowned. What do you mean? Her breath hitched and she looked toward the sleeping boy. Ben, he's mine. Thomas doesn't know. He thought I couldn't bear children and I let him believe it. When I left, I took Ben and my sister's girl Emma to keep her safe. Thomas would have used him for ransom if he'd known. Thunder cracked outside, shaking the walls. So the sheriff's right, Thatcher said softly. Your husband's still alive? Yes, Nora whispered. And he'll come. He always does. Thatcher stood there a long moment, watching the firelight flicker across her face. She wasn't a liar trying to fool him. She was a woman cornered by her own past. Finally, he said, then we'll be ready for him. Nora looked up, startled. You'd risk your ranch for me? For them, he said, glancing toward the children. And maybe for you, too. Outside, rain finally began to fall, soft at first, then steady. It pattered against the roof like a lullaby. For the first time since she'd arrived, Nora smiled, not from relief, but from the strange, fragile hope that maybe this place could hold her story without breaking. Morning came with clear skies and the smell of wet earth. The storm had passed, leaving puddles that caught the sun like small mirrors. Life on the ranch went on, but something had shifted. Thatcher rose before dawn, his mind heavy with what Nora had told him. Every sound on the wind, every rider in the distance felt like a warning. He found her in the kitchen, kneading bread with quiet focus, sleeves rolled and hair pulled back. The two children sat at the table waiting for breakfast, sleepy-eyed but smiling. For a moment, the sight almost looked like peace. You're up early again, he said. Nora looked up, a faint smile tugging at her mouth. Old habits, she said, just like before. He hesitated. If Winfield comes this way, you'll need to trust me. No more hiding, no more half-truths. She pressed the dough with her palms firm and steady. I trust you, she said. But her voice was thin, like she wasn't sure if she meant it. Outside, O'Brien and the men were talking in low voices. The bounty poster had spread. They'd found another copy tacked outside the general store that morning. Same face, higher reward. Sheriff's not letting this one go, O'Brien muttered. Somebody wants her found badly. Thatcher came out, hearing enough to quiet them with a look. You'll do your work and keep your mouth shut, he said. She's done nothing wrong here. Most nodded, loyal to him. A few exchanged doubtful glances but said nothing. Out here, loyalty ran deep, but gold could dig deeper. Later that day, Nora took the children out to the creek that wound through the cottonwoods. She let Emma gather wildflowers while Ben skipped stones. The air smelled sweet after the rain, and for a while, it almost felt like the world had forgiven her. Then she saw it. Hoofprints in the mud. Fresh ones leading from the road toward the water. She froze, heart pounding. Whoever it was hadn't ridden close enough to be seen from the house, but near enough to be watching. That night, when Thatcher came in from the barn, he found her standing by the window again, pale and still. Someone's been near, she said quietly. Tracks by the creek, he frowned. How fresh? Hours, maybe less. He rested his hat on the table, jaw tight. Could be drifters. Or him, she whispered. The silence stretched. Firelight flickered over her face, showing fear she was too proud to voice. You've done nothing wrong, Thatcher said. If he comes, we'll deal with it. Her eyes lifted. You talk like the law listens to men like you. Out here it doesn't. It listens to whoever shouts louder or pays better. He didn't argue. She was right. Days passed. The ranch moved more slowly, as if holding its breath. Nora taught Emma to sing. Ben rode his pony under Thatcher's watchful eye. Sometimes in the evenings Nora hummed while the men listened from the doorway, too proud to admit how it soothed them. It was during one of those evenings that the next shadow fell. A rider came from town, dust rising behind him. It was Sheriff Wilkes again. He dismounted stiffly and handed Thatcher a folded paper. "She's wanted in 3 counties now," he said. "Her husband's offering double for her return. Claims she took a child that's his by blood." Nora stood on the porch frozen. The children peeked out behind her. Thatcher's voice was calm but cold. "He's a liar," Wilkes sighed. "Maybe, but he's got money and a mouth that doesn't quit. I'm under pressure to act. If you're hiding her, Thatcher, you could be charged for obstruction." The sheriff tipped his hat and rode off, leaving dust and dread behind him. Nora turned to Thatcher, her face pale as bone. "He's close," she whispered. "I can feel it." Thatcher looked toward the horizon where the sky burned red with sunset. "Then let him come," he said quietly. "He'll find this ranch isn't so easy to take from." But inside he knew it wasn't just a fight for the ranch anymore. It was for the fragile peace she'd brought. The laughter, the songs, the life that had returned to the bunkhouse. And somewhere out there, a man who'd lost everything was coming to take it all back. The next morning broke uneasily. The ranch hands worked more slowly, glancing at the horizon between every swing of the hammer or toss of hay. Even the horses seemed restless, their ears twitching at sounds no one else could hear. Nora felt it too. She moved through the day quietly, like a shadow trying not to disturb the light. The children stayed close. Emma clutching her doll, Ben following Thatcher everywhere he went. Every creak of the gate or thud of hooves made Nora stiffen. By noon the heat pressed down heavily, and Thatcher called everyone to the corral. "Listen up," he said. "There's talk that a man named Thomas Winfield is looking this way. If he rides in, you don't act rashly. He's not law, just loud. You let me handle it," O'Brien spoke first. "What if the sheriff rides with him?" Thatcher's jaw tightened. "Then we show proof of what she told us, that she ran to protect a child, not steal one." The men nodded, though unease still flickered in their eyes. Out here the law wasn't always clean, and every man knew it. That afternoon Nora sat with Emma on the porch, sewing a patch on Ben's jacket. Her hands were steady, but her thoughts ran wild. "Your uncle is a good man," she said softly. "But sometimes even good men can't stop what's coming." Emma looked up. "Are we gonna have to leave again?" Nora hesitated. "I hope not," she whispered. "I'm tired of running." Inside the bunkhouse, Thatcher stood at the window watching them. Something about the way Nora bent her head toward the girl, protective, gentle, brave, made his chest tighten. He'd seen plenty of women break under less fear. She held herself like a reed, bending, never snapping. That evening the peace was shattered. A rider appeared on the ridge as the sun dipped low, then another and another. By the time they reached the fence line, there were 5 of them. One rode ahead, in a black coat and hat too fine for a drifter. Thomas Winfield. Even from a distance, Nora knew. Her blood went cold. The gambler's smooth posture, the tilt of his head, it all came back like a wound reopening. Thatcher walked out to meet him. "Calm as stone." "Afternoon," Winfield called, smiling like a man walking into his own parlor. "Fine place you've got here. I hear you've been keeping my wife." "She's not yours anymore," Thatcher said evenly. Winfield laughed. "The law says otherwise. And that boy she's been passing off as her nephew? He's mine by blood." Nora stepped out then, holding Ben's hand tight. "Don't you speak his name," she said, her voice trembling but clear. Winfield's eyes narrowed. "There she is, the runaway songbird. Did you tell them how you ruined me, Nora? How did you cost me everything I had?" Thatcher moved slightly, placing himself between them. "You cost yourself," he said. "Now get off my land." But Winfield only smiled wider. "Oh, I'll go," he said, "after I take what's mine. You've got until sundown tomorrow to hand her over, or I come back with law and lead." He turned his horse and the men followed him down the ridge. When the dust settled, Nora's knees gave out. Thatcher caught her before she fell. "It's over," she whispered. "He's found us." Thatcher helped her sit on the porch. "He won't touch you. Or the children." She shook her head. "You don't understand. He doesn't care about me. He wants to hurt what I love. That's what he's always done." Thatcher looked out at the setting sun where the horizon glowed blood red. "Then we'll make sure he finds nothing easy to break." That night, the bunkhouse men cleaned their rifles and checked their saddles. The air was heavy with fear and something fiercer. Loyalty. Inside the house, Nora rocked Ben to sleep, her lullaby low and trembling. But when Thatcher passed the window, he saw her lips trembling, eyes wet with dread. Outside, coyotes cried in the distance. Inside, the song broke halfway through, because tomorrow the storm would ride straight through their door. Dawn came cold and still, the kind of morning that made the land hold its breath. The bunkhouse men moved quietly, their boots thudding against the packed dirt. Guns laid out on the table for oiling. No one joked. No one sang. Thatcher stood by the porch railing, scanning the far ridge where Winfield had appeared the night before. He hadn't slept, not even a little. His thoughts circled one thing: how to keep Nora and the children safe when trouble came riding back. Behind him, the door creaked open. Nora stepped out, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. "He'll come," she said softly. Thatcher nodded. "Aye, but we'll be ready." She looked at him for a long time, her eyes tired but steady. "You don't owe me this fight," he met her gaze. "Maybe not. But those children need a home, and I'll be damned if I let any man take it from them." Her lips trembled with something between gratitude and fear. "You don't know what he's capable of." "I know men like him," Thatcher said. Loud, proud, always thinking they own what they broke. For a moment they stood there in silence, two people bound by loss, staring out across the same horizon. By noon, the ranch was ready. Fences mended, wagons moved into position for cover, rifles checked twice. The men looked to Thatcher for orders, and he gave them without raising his voice. Calm, solid, like a mountain in the storm. Inside the house, Nora packed a small bag, food, a blanket, and her Bible just in case. She stopped when she reached the children's room. Emma was asleep on the bed, her doll tucked close, while Ben sat by the window polishing the wooden horse Thatcher had made for him. "Mama," he said softly. It was the first time he'd ever called her that out loud. "Are we leaving again?" She froze, her throat tight. "Not this time, sweetheart," she said. "Not if I can help it." Outside, the sun dropped lower, painting the sky in deep red streaks. The wind carried dust and the faint jingle of spurs. "They're coming," O'Brien said. 5 riders again. This time with more confidence, more noise. Thomas Winfield led them, grinning like he'd already won. Behind him, one man carried a paper stamped with the sheriff's seal. "Best let me handle it," Thatcher murmured, stepping forward. Winfield reined in his horse near the gate. "Afternoon, Cole," he said. "Brought a friend this time. Sheriff Wilkes himself." Wilkes looked uneasy. "Thatcher, I got a warrant to bring Mrs. Winfield in for questioning. You know how it works." Thatcher's voice was calm but sharp. "And I know false charges when I hear 'em." Winfield smirked. "She ran with stolen money, Sheriff, my money. Took my son with her." Nora stepped out then, her face pale but proud. "You lost that right the day you raised your hand to me," she said. "And you'll never lay a finger on this child again." Wilkes blinked, torn. "Ma'am, if you've got proof of wrongdoing, you can show it." Nora reached into her shawl and pulled out a folded paper. "I kept this since the night I left. Ledger pages from his card table. Every name he cheated, every dollar stolen. His handwriting. He forged the sheriff's signature once, too. That's why he ran." Winfield's grin faltered. "You're lying." Thatcher handed the papers to Wilkes. "Read for yourself." The sheriff's brows knit as he scanned them. The more he read, the redder his face grew. When he finally looked up, his voice was cold. "Thomas Winfield, you're under arrest for fraud and forgery." Winfield's men reached for their guns, but Thatcher was faster. One warning shot cracked the air, echoing through the valley. Horses reared, dust flew, and the men scattered. Wilkes grabbed Winfield's arm and shoved him toward his horse. "You'll answer for this in court," he said. As they rode off, the sound of hooves faded until only the wind remained. Nora stood still on the porch, tears tracking down her cheeks. "It's over," she whispered, barely believing it. Thatcher took off his hat, eyes soft. "No, ma'am. It's just beginning." Inside the bunkhouse, the men cheered. The sound was raw, full of relief and pride. But out on the porch, the quiet between Nora and Thatcher said more than words ever could. Because what they'd fought for wasn't just safety. It was belonging. The next day dawned soft and gold, the kind of morning that almost felt like forgiveness. The air smelled of dew and horses, and for the first time in months the bunkhouse buzzed with easy laughter. The danger was gone, or so everyone hoped. Nora stood by the porch railing, watching Ben chase a chicken through the yard while Emma helped O'Brien feed the horses. Her heart still raced when she thought of the night before, the flash of guns, the sound of her husband's voice. But each breath came a little steadier now. The storm had passed. Thatcher stepped out from the barn, his hat tipped low. "They're safe," he said, nodding toward the children. Nora smiled faintly. "You kept your word." "Wasn't just me," he said. "Whole ranch stood for you." "I know." She looked down at her hands, rough from work. "I don't deserve it." Thatcher's voice softened. "You do. You've turned this place into a home again. Haven't you noticed? The men talk less meanly. They even wash before breakfast now." That made her laugh. A sound quiet but real. But behind the calm, something still sat heavy in her chest. The sheriff had ridden off with Winfield, yes, but she knew men like her husband. Smooth tongues. Quick lies. If there was a chance to twist the story, he'd take it. That night, after the children were asleep, Nora went out to the porch. The stars hung clear over the prairie, cold and bright. Thatcher joined her, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "My life's been running for so long. I keep expecting it to start again." He leaned against the post beside her. "You're safe here." She looked at him, eyes catching the lantern glow. "You say that like you mean it." "I do," he said simply. "You're part of this place now." Her lips parted, but no words came. They stood in quiet, listening to the wind hum through the cottonwoods. The silence between them was not heavy anymore. It was full, alive, like the pause before a song begins. Over the next few days, life fell into rhythm. Nora taught Emma her letters. Ben helped Thatcher mend a fence. The bunkhouse men started calling her Miss Wynne, with a kind of respect that carried warmth instead of distance. She cooked for them, tended their cuts and bruises, even teased O'Brien when he burnt the coffee again. But peace never lasted long on the frontier. Late one afternoon, a rider galloped in fast from town, dust flying, face pale. "Thatcher," he shouted. "Sheriff sent me. Winfield escaped on the trail." The ranch went still. Nora froze on the porch, her hands gripping the railing until her knuckles whitened. "No," she whispered. "He can't." Thatcher's face hardened. "How long ago?" 2 days, the rider said. "They think he's heading this way." Said he swore to finish what he started. Nora swayed, her breath catching. "He won't stop until one of us is dead." Thatcher caught her shoulders gently. "You listen to me, he's not taking you nor that boy. He's got to come through me first." O'Brien came running from the bunkhouse, rifle already slung across his chest. "You just say the word, boss." "We'll be ready." Thatcher looked at Nora, then at the children peeking through the window, frightened but trusting. "No," he said firmly. "This time we take them to the ridge cabin. Safer up there. He can't circle without being seen." The men saddled the horses as the sun dipped low. The children were bundled in blankets, eyes wide but quiet. Nora climbed onto the wagon seat beside Thatcher, heart pounding as the ranch fell behind them in the dusk. She looked back once, watching the windows fade in the dark. "Do you think he'll find us?" Thatcher didn't answer right away. His jaw was tight, his eyes on the horizon. If he does, he said at last, then he'll find out what kind of fight he's picked. The wind grew colder as night deepened. Coyotes called in the distance. And though Nora sat close enough to feel Thatcher's shoulder brush hers, fear crept in again. Soft as a shadow, steady as breath. The past wasn't finished yet. It was riding hard to catch up. The ridge cabin sat high above the valley, hidden among pine and stone. It was old, built long before Thatcher owned the land. One of those frontier shelters meant to keep storms out and secrets in. Smoke from the small chimney rose thin against the gray dawn. Nora helped Emma and Ben settle inside. The children were brave, though their eyes darted toward every sound outside. Thatcher moved with quiet purpose, checking the windows, setting up oil lamps, and stacking firewood by the door. His rifle rested within reach. "We'll stay here till the sheriff catches him," Thatcher said. "Food'll last a week, maybe more." Nora nodded, though fear gnawed at her belly. She busied herself making biscuits, trying to keep her hands from trembling. "You think he'll come here?" she asked. Thatcher looked out through the narrow window slit. "If he's smart, he won't, but he's not a man driven by reason anymore." The words hung heavy in the room. By noon, a light snow began to fall. The air was sharp, every breath visible. Nora wrapped a shawl around Emma and pulled Ben close beside her near the hearth. The boy leaned against her shoulder, thumb tracing the edge of her sleeve. "Mama used to hum when it snowed," Ben whispered. Nora smiled faintly. "Would you like me to?" He nodded, so she hummed, a soft, wavering tune that drifted through the little cabin. It wasn't a song for courage or sorrow. It was something in between, something that filled the space between fear and hope. Even Thatcher, sitting by the door with his rifle, looked up for a moment. The song faded as the snow thickened. That night the wind howled around the cabin walls. O'Brien and 2 ranch hands had joined them by dusk, taking shifts to keep watch outside. Nora couldn't sleep. Each creak of the timber made her think of hoofbeats, each gust of wind a whisper of her husband's voice. Thatcher sat near the fire, staring into the flames. "You should rest," he said quietly. "I can't," she murmured. He used to come back from town mean when he drank. I'd hear his horse long before he reached the door. My heart still hears it. Thatcher looked at her, eyes soft with something unspoken. "You don't owe him that kind of fear anymore." She met his gaze. "Fear doesn't care what I owe." Outside the wind shifted. Then a faint sound. Hoofbeats. Thatcher rose at once, motioning for silence. The children stirred, but Nora pressed a finger to her lips. O'Brien slipped in from outside, face pale. Rider coming up the north trail, alone. Nora's heart dropped. Thatcher grabbed his rifle and checked the window. "Get the children in the back room," he said. Nora obeyed, guiding them behind the curtain that divided the cabin. She knelt between them, holding their hands. Emma's whisper trembled. "Is it him?" Nora didn't answer. Outside, the horse slowed. Then came a voice, low, slurred, too familiar. "You think you can hide my wife, Thatcher? You think you can steal my family?" Thatcher opened the door, stepping into the cold. "Your family left because of what you are," he said, steady as stone. "Go back, Winfield. You cross this line, I won't let you walk away." A cruel laugh echoed through the trees. "You always fancied yourself the savior, didn't you?" Then the crack of a gunshot split the air. Nora screamed. The children clung to her. She crawled forward, heart pounding, and saw through the doorlight. The 2 men circling, gun smoke curling between them like ghosts. Thatcher fired once, twice. The echo rolled across the ridge. Then silence. Snow fell heavily now, covering everything, boots, tracks, and blood. Nora stumbled outside, the cold biting her skin. Thatcher stood over Winfield's body, his breath harsh in the freezing air. He lowered the gun slowly. "It's over," he said, voice shaking for the first time. Nora pressed her hands to her mouth, tears burning her eyes. "No," she whispered. "It's finally over." She turned toward the cabin. where Emma's small face peeked from behind the curtain, and the firelight flickered like dawn. The ridge had seen death before, but this time it had given back life. The next morning came pale and quiet. Snow covered the ridge like a clean sheet, softening everything it touched. Smoke rose steadily from the cabin chimney. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and wood ash. Thatcher sat near the hearth, his arm in a sling. The bullet had grazed him, painful but not deadly. O'Brien had ridden down to town before sunrise to fetch the sheriff. Nora moved gently between the rooms, tending to the children and keeping the fire alive. Every motion of hers was calm now, like a storm had passed through her and left still water behind. Emma brought her a blanket. "Mama said you were brave," she whispered. Nora smiled faintly. "Did she?" "She said only brave women sing when they're scared." Nora knelt and pulled the girl close. "Then I guess I must have been very scared." Thatcher watched them quietly. The lines around his eyes had softened. "You're staying here till the sheriff sorts things out," he said. "No more running." "I don't want to run anymore," she replied. "I'm tired of being afraid of my own name." He nodded. "Then you'll need to tell it. The whole truth this time." She took a deep breath. "My real name is Nora Winfield. I married him when I was 19. He promised a ranch in Wyoming, but it was all lies. He gambled, stole, and blamed me for his debts. When he started using the children as leverage to pay them off, I took them and ran. I told everyone they were my sisters because I knew he'd come for me." Thatcher's jaw tightened. "The boy Ben, he's yours?" She nodded. "By blood. Emma isn't. Her mother died in childbirth. But they've only ever known each other as brother and sister. I could never separate them." Thatcher leaned back, staring into the flames. "You did what you had to. A good mother would have done the same." Nora blinked at him. "You don't think I sinned, then? Taking another woman's child? Lying to protect her?" He looked at her for a long moment. "I think God sees the heart clearer than any lawman does." Silence filled the room again. Soft, peaceful silence. The kind that didn't weigh heavily anymore. By midday, the sheriff arrived, hat dusted white with snow. He stepped inside and nodded toward Thatcher. "Heard you had trouble up here." "Trouble's over," Thatcher said, standing. "Winfield's body's out back. He fired first." The sheriff nodded grimly. "Witnesses?" "O'Brien saw enough," Thatcher said. The sheriff turned to Nora. "Ma'am, I'll need your statement." Nora told the story from the start. No trembling, no hiding. When she finished, the sheriff simply tipped his hat. "You've suffered enough, Mrs. Winfield. I'll file it as self-defense and close the matter." When he left, the cabin felt lighter somehow, like every wall had exhaled. Nora sank into the chair by the fire, her hands folded over her lap. Emma crawled into her arms. "Can we go home now?" Nora looked at Thatcher. "If he'll have us." Thatcher met her eyes, steady as ever. "You already are home." Evening came quietly. The snow had stopped, leaving the world washed clean. The bunkhouse below glowed warm through the trees. When they finally rode down the ridge, the men came out to meet them, faces lined with relief and respect. Ben ran ahead, shouting, "She's back! Mama's back!" The men cheered softly, removing their hats. Someone started strumming a guitar near the porch. Inside, Nora laid her shawl over a chair and went straight to the stove, stirring the stew someone had left simmering. The simple act felt sacred. Thatcher came beside her, his rough hand brushing hers as he passed her a spoon. "Feels different," he said quietly. "It does," she answered, "like it's ours again." Outside, laughter carried through the cold air, echoing against the barn walls where once there had been only silence. Winter passed slowly but kindly. The snow melted from the ridge and the fields turned green again. Calves were born, fences mended, and laughter began to sound across the yard where once there had only been echo. Nora's lullabies drifted through the bunkhouse at night, soft songs that carried through the rafters, mixing with the smell of stew and wood smoke. The men would pretend not to listen, But more than one rough hand wiped at a quiet tear now and then. The children grew sturdy again. Emma helped in the kitchen, always humming beside Nora. Ben followed Thatcher everywhere, out to the barns, the creek, the far pasture. The boy's laugh was loud now, wild as a colt. One evening, when the sun burned gold across the prairie, Thatcher leaned against the fence rail watching them. Nora came to stand beside him, brushing the dust from her skirt. "You fixed the place," he said. She looked at him, smiling softly. "No, the place fixed me," he chuckled, low and warm. "You ever think about leaving? Starting somewhere new?" "I used to," she said. "Now I think, maybe I've been running so long I forgot what it feels like to stay." Thatcher turned toward her. The light caught in her hair, turning it the color of wheat. "Then stay," he said simply. "We could all use someone who knows how to make a house sound alive again." Her throat tightened. "You sure about that?" He nodded once. "I've buried too much to waste what's still standing." That night the bunkhouse gathered for supper. The long table was crowded, men laughing, children passing bread, Nora refilling mugs. Thatcher sat at the head, eyes traveling over every face, landing last on hers. When the plates were cleared, Emma climbed onto a stool and started humming. The men quieted. Nora smiled at her, then joined in. Soon Ben's small voice followed, and then, hesitantly, Thatcher's deep hum joined theirs. The sound filled the room, low and full and alive. The melody was simple, but it carried everything: grief, forgiveness, and the strange peace that comes when broken things finally settle into place. Later, after the others drifted to their bunks, Nora stepped outside. The night smelled of lilac and horses. Stars burned wide across the sky. Thatcher followed her to the porch, carrying a blanket. "Cold out," he said, draping it over her shoulders. "Not as cold as it used to be," she murmured. They stood there in quiet. Somewhere a coyote called, and the horses answered softly from the corral. "I keep thinking about that first night," Thatcher said. "You sitting by the fire, humming like you were afraid the sound might break." "I was," she admitted. "But you heard me anyway." He smiled faintly. "Couldn't help it." The door creaked open behind them. Emma sleepily held her doll. "Mama," she whispered. "Ben wants a song." Nora looked up at Thatcher, who was already smiling. "Go on," he said. "I'll bring him out here." A few minutes later, Ben was in Thatcher's arms, half asleep, his head on the man's shoulder. Nora began to sing. The melody rose and fell with the wind, wrapping the porch, the children, and the land itself in something tender and eternal. When she finished, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, like the world had stopped just to listen. Thatcher met her eyes. "Home," he said quietly. She nodded. Home, and under the wide western sky, with two children safe in their arms and the sound of her song fading into the night, they stood together, no longer haunted by what they'd lost, but thankful for what they'd found. The bunkhouse lights flickered once more, warm against the dark. Inside and out, every heart that had been waiting too long for peace finally found it. If you felt this story in your heart, don't write off just yet. Hit subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next tale from the frontier, where love, loss, and courage still find a home under the wide western sky.